Hello there. I'm just going to finish off reading the part 7 of the Private Eye sequence of articles by Dr. Philip Hammond. I'd got to the section where it says 14 months later. Dr. Evans has told The Guardian he has completed his final report on how baby C died just 14 months after Lucy Letby was convicted of killing him. It seems an odd way to conduct a criminal trial, but there are plenty of things in this case that don't stack up. Well, Evans completing this report and going back on what he said in the trial, in his evidence, and subverting that and changing it, changing the nature of what he says the method of homicide was. 14 months later is not part of that trial. That's not relevant to that trial. It shows what a farce that trial was in retrospect, but it's not part of the trial itself. It's not part of the conduct of that trial. What is part of the conduct is of Evans. It's the conduct of Evans to show him retrospectively as being utterly unreliable, and that all of his evidence should be deemed unreliable. And what it's an odd way to conduct, what is being conducted oddly is the justice system as a whole, in terms of that this should throw up red flags clearly to the Court of Appeal, or to someone that's got the power to force the Court of Appeal to accept that there needs to be either to quash the convictions rather, or to order a retrial, but ideally the first, because there's just no point in a retrial, because there's no evidence against Lucy Letby whatsoever, and there never has been. So it's just an odd way to put it there about that it's the conduct of the trial, because this is subsequent to the trial. If it's happening, if he's making, maybe that sounds a bit picky, but it's just how it strikes me. If it's something he's doing 14 months after, it's not relevant to the conduct of the trial, but it's relevant to the content of the trial and relevant to his obvious, and maybe that's what Dr. Philip Hammond means. But I like to talk about these things because I think it highlights, it brings into greater focus exactly what a basket case the trial was, obviously. And it's showing it in retrospect because of the subsequent actions of Evans. Evans has revised his view multiple times in this case. I know the thing that I focus on is language more than anything else. And anyway, I won't keep interrupting too much, but he won't be publishing his findings, as he also told The Guardian that Cheshire Police has told him not to discuss baby C in the press anymore. So he'd keep it to himself, will he? Until he's trying to do damage limitation. He's trying to get in there and protect himself, defend himself, because Evans knows he's on the ropes. Everyone knows he's on the ropes. The justice system knows he's on the ropes. The justice system knows that the justice system's on the ropes. And the Thirlwall inquiry is the pretense, is meant to be the sticking plaster over all that, is part of the fraud. The whole trial, the whole investigation, every element of it is a fraud. The Thirlwall inquiry is a further fraud to cover up. Is a further fraud and a fiction to cover up the fraud that's gone thus far over all these years. And not only a fraud, a crime against Lucy Letby and her family, and a crime against the parents. That's what it is. That's what the investigation and the trial and the fakery of the Court of Appeal and the fakery of the Thirlwall inquiry is. It's a crime, I believe. It's certainly a moral crime. So he's keeping Sturm well, Evans doesn't really want to keep Sturm. He keeps wanting to defend himself, but he's, as we've seen before, he's digging the hole deeper and deeper because he exposes himself more and more for the complete, deranged pathological entity that he is and has always been. This is someone that's, without even meeting someone, accuses a mother of, or diagnoses them actually, outside of his experience, his specialism, his training, his qualifications, diagnoses someone as having Munchausen's by proxy. Just does it and has never met them in relation to this, a mother's relationship with their daughter, being concerned for the daughter's health and trying to get them treatment. But Evans knows best, you see. And the daughter in this case has got a very particular condition. And it's real, and it is eventually diagnosed. But Evans at the time splits the mother and daughter up and accuses the mother, or diagnoses the mother, which is like an accusation as well actually, of having Munchausen's by proxy. And he's allowed to get away with that. He's incredibly dangerous, and always has been. Says here, at the very least, he must share his report with baby C's parents and legal team, who must be very angry and utterly bewildered. Well, yes, they would be. And more about that is that surely, I shouldn't say surely, but might it not be the case that baby C's parents, as indeed other parents in this case, I can't know, we can't know, but might it be that they are, to whatever degree, beginning to suspect that Lucy Letby is innocent of all this, and it's actually the hospital behind it, the failures of the hospital and the failures of the doctors? Particularly as some of those families, I believe, and I understand, that some of them had actually retained the services of a Chester solicitor back in 2017 in relation to what they felt was the suboptimal care. I don't know how many of what ends up being all the families of the babies that are part of the indictment, as it were. But I would imagine some of them are. Wouldn't they be thinking, oh, maybe that's what they've done then? They've blamed somebody, they've scapegoated someone because we were going to bring a case against the trust and the doctors because of the failures in care. And they're doing it perhaps to save money, or to cover up the truth, to scapegoat someone. Might it be the case that some of the parents are already thinking that to some degree? I don't know. Especially when you've got a character like Evans to keep on writing new reports over a year after the convictions happened to say, well, no, it didn't happen like this. It's monstrous, and he is monstrous, and the whole system is monstrous in the way it wants to perpetuate this miscarriage of justice, and would be happy for it to be perpetuated in perpetuity. The next section, CCRC application, Criminal Cases Review Commission, that is. Lucy Letby's last chance of an appeal, which MD supports, MD is Dr. Philip Hammond, is the Criminal Cases Review Commission application. The CCRC needs to consider whether there were procedural errors in the original trial, failure to disclose the Hutton emails, that's Professor Hutton, and to do with the fact that the police allegedly wanted to use her, or did want to use her, and the CPS talked them out of it, whether they had the right to do that, whether there was a meeting of minds to say the police realised that they didn't want to do it either, i.e. because it wouldn't help get their charges over the line, etc. Failure to allow the Horden report as a procedural error. Failure to redact staff names and initials from the clinical records before handing them to Dewey Evans to screen blind. Well, that's interesting that Dr. Philip Hammond mentions this here, because earlier in the article, and perhaps that's why I queried it in the last email I did last night, this notion of him doing something blind versus Dr. Horden doing something open eyes. This is a bit of a contradiction in this article, because he's stating here, Dr. Philip Hammond, that the failure to redact staff names and initials, i.e. this is something I said probably about 13, 14 months ago, is that while at the same time in the interviews in 2023, post-trial interviews, Evans is saying, I didn't know Lucy Letby's name. I was saying in videos around that time, well, he's got all these medical notes, whether they're electronic, he prints them off, whatever. It's utterly unbelievable what he's saying, that he didn't know her name, doesn't know her from a bar of soap, doesn't know her, doesn't know the name, doesn't mean anything to her. Her name and or initials are the most salient names, initials that he's seeing on those medical notes, in terms of all the cases that he's going, oh my God, another case of deliberate harm, another one. And we're expected to believe that he doesn't notice the commonality there, when he also knows and has been told that someone's been removed from the unit, and he says, oh, I didn't know her name. I don't believe a word of it at all. Don't believe a word of what they're saying. There's 1,001 lies they've told. I'm talking about the police, Evans, the consultants. It's a construction. It's built on lies. It's built on malice. It's built on bullying. And then it has to. They've got to try to make it into this edifice that's got some kind of validity and probity to it, and they just can't do it because it's the foundations aren't there, and it keeps leaking out. The issues keep leaking out for them, and they're going to continue in that vein. So here, yes, we see Dr. Philip Hammond saying that he didn't obviously screen them quote-unquote blind, but early in the article he's saying he did, so I don't understand that. But at least it's an acknowledgement that clearly he did not. Does Evans's withdrawal of air down the nasogastric tube as a mode of murder invalidate some convictions? Well, you'd hope so, wouldn't you? You'd hope that it would invalidate his credibility 100%, wouldn't you? You'd hope so in a sane world. In a sane world, yeah. But the criminal justice system, how it operates, its protocols and its way of being and way of going about things isn't sane, isn't rational, isn't moral, isn't located in justice and truth, doesn't care about those things, does not care about them. There's a bracketed part here. Prosecution barrister Nicholas Johnson, yeah, a vicious individual, specifically told the jury Lucy Letby killed baby C using air down the feeding tube based on Evans's testimony. Yes, and on that basis, those convictions were made. The jury took that as verbatim, and they believed it. And now even the people that submitted that as the evidence don't believe it. They don't believe it, but they got a jury to believe it. There has never been robust scientific proof of deliberate harm. Well, I go further than that. I don't need the qualifier robust. There has never been scientific proof of deliberate harm. Never. None, zero. So to qualify it by saying there hasn't been any robust is weak in my opinion, and it's just maybe it's just the style people write in, but it's just, I'd like to say it categorically. There's no proof. There's no scientific proof at all. And what there is a lot of scientific and medical evidence contrary to the idea that there was deliberate harm. And that is robust. A lot of that is robust. Not only is there not robust scientific proof of deliberate harm, there's no scientific proof of deliberate harm. I think it should be categorically stated, because that's the truth. Neonatologists far more experts and current. It sounds like I'm criticising the article, and I am picking at it because, and I'm using, the reason I'm doing that is to get, hopefully dynamically, to the state of affairs that actually represents what's happened and what is the state of affairs, rather than kind of sort of saying it and making assertions that he did something blind and Dr. Horton did something open eyes, and I just don't understand the juxtaposition there. And clearly, even Dr. Philip Hammond doesn't really recognise or believe that Evans did a blind, and obviously Sandy Bowen didn't either, even more so, because she was just fed Evans's reports to rubber stamp them. Anyway, I've said that so many times, all that stuff. So there's no robust scientific proof of deliberate harm, obviously not. Neonatologists far more expert and current than the prosecution employed. Well, again, there's a lack of clarity here in this statement, because Evans isn't a neonatologist. So it's not the fact that these neonatologists are meticulously analysing the clinical record, which they are, in comparison to a neonatologist who was less expert and less current. It's that the leading expert, you can forget about Bowen. She's just there to make the numbers up, actually, to make it look as though it's believable, to make it look as though there's some probity there, there's some checking mechanism. It's completely fake. Obviously it's fake. She's in name a neonatologist, but she's obviously just there as a hired gun to back up Evans. And it's not that the current neonatologists analysing stuff, analysing all the evidence, are more expert than Evans the neonatologist, is that he's not one at all. He's not one at all. And should never have been giving any evidence, should never have been anywhere near any court ever in his life, but especially not in that case last year. They will likely argue, this is the actual expert neonatologists, people like Dimitrova, Svetlana Dimitrova, Dr. Dimitrova, and others, and obviously Professor Hall, that was there to be called at the trial but wasn't called by Myers for some very, very weird reason that we'll probably never be told. And he was surprised that he wasn't called himself, but good man that he is, he's recently spoken about it and written letters about it, made his feelings public about it, within the scope that he's allowed to. So they're analysing. They will likely argue that these neonatologists, far from being unexplained, many, and perhaps all, the collapses can be explained by sick babies receiving substandard care. Yes, sick babies. Yes, incredibly high acuity babies with a range of complicated issues that they were dealing with, very premature, many of them twins and triplets, which increases the dangers towards them when they're already struggling with prematurity, etc. Yes to all the substandard care. You've got to go further than that. The negligence, the absolute negligence, more than substandard, more than not optimal. It's negligence for a baby not to have liquids for hours and hours on end, even though Evans said, no, it's okay. And as Dr. McConville said, no, this is ridiculous. Evans said, no, that's all right for the baby not to have any liquids for like 4 hours when it's just so premature, it's just struggling just to survive. And you're going to not give it any liquids for 4 hours, or for the baby not to have the surfactant for its lungs, or for another baby not to have the antibiotics for an extended period of time. And all this fakery that Evans and Bowen says no, it wouldn't have harmed them having that, missing out that liquid, missing out having any liquids coming into them, missing out any surfactant, missing out any. They kind of grudgingly say, oh yeah, well, it could have been better. But it's not just substandard, it's not just suboptimal. These are weasel words in a way. They're weasel words. It's negligence. It's medical negligence. And those would have formed part of the medical negligence cases that some of those parents were actually actively bringing, and had hired and had contracted with a Chester solicitor in 2017, and they're all put on ice, all stopped by the so-called police investigation, by the corrupt Cheshire police. Some babies might still be alive and thriving with better medical care. Well, absolutely. Absolutely. And they shouldn't have been in that unit at all. They should have been in a level 3 unit. Shouldn't have been there at all. If the CCRC accepts this line of argument, Lucy Letby's absence or presence becomes an irrelevance. Well, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the point I was trying to make last night with this really thorny bit that I was trying to struggle over, where Dr. Hammond was saying, Dr. Horden's report shows that she's choosing, what was he saying? It was to do with, it says here 17 troubling cases Horden identified, so it was deemed irrelevant. Yeah, that's the idea, that the court deemed it irrelevant ridiculously. In fact, that makes it highly relevant because it shows babies deteriorated unexpectedly in the absence of Lucy Letby. Well, first, I made the point last night, well, he doesn't know that. Well, I don't know if he knows that. I think he's asserting that without evidence. In other words, he doesn't know what the rotas were for all those 17 cases. Because we don't know what those 17 cases were, do we? Because if not all of them end up on the indictment, well, then there are other cases which have medical notes that weren't supplied to the trial, weren't supplied to Evans. Or maybe they were supplied to Evans, but they were ones that he deemed that Lucy Letby wasn't involved in. But then Dr. Hammond is sort of asserting here that baby deteriorated unexpectedly in the absence of Lucy Letby. But he doesn't know that. But the point being, the bigger point here that he's making later in the article, that he's confirming later in the article in contradiction to this, is that what Dr. Horden was doing, what she was not doing was trying to find out who did it. She wasn't looking for a murderer. She was looking to find out what happened medically in the experience of those babies, what happened to those babies during their stay at Councillor Chester Hospital to explain why they collapsed or why they sadly died. And it was all around the medical aspects. And she wasn't looking for a culprit. It's Evans and the police are looking for a culprit, led on, fed by Breary and co. They're all in the business of looking for a culprit. Dr. Horden never was looking for a culprit. So, as I was saying last night, it's immaterial whether Lucy Letby's there or not. And finally, at the end of this article, in this section here, the penultimate section, Dr. Philip Hammond acknowledges clearly what is the case is that Lucy's absence or presence is irrelevant. He says it's an irrelevance, becomes an irrelevance. It's immaterial, as I said last night, which is what it always should have been. Because it's not about who did it; it's about what happened, and what happened is suboptimal care. And then there is a who did it then in terms of which doctors didn't do what they should have been, and structurally what was not done, what was not there as a service, as a level 2 unit that should have been, in terms of a certain level of senior cover, in terms of the right number of doctors, the right number of consultant ward rounds, which were all missing. Then that is about who, and then the who is the trust, and then it's individual doctors that failed. and which includes all those consultants, probably the gang of 7, and it certainly brings in Breary and Jayaram, then it is about the who in terms of responsibility for negligence, for failure, and then it's about the NHS as a whole, and that's what they're about protecting now. And unfortunately, Myers tried to play this unplayable game, as it were, to project this idea that, we're not attacking the NHS here. But if you daren't lay a glove on them, if you daren't lay a glove on the trust while trying to defend Lucy Letby, well, you're in an untenable position, because that's precisely what you've got to do. You've got to say this place was a dangerous place, this place was unsafe, which is exactly what one of the consultants, Alison Timmis, said at the time. Last section, I'm going to finish this today. Ask the other experts, that's what it says. MD, that's Philip Hammond, still can't find a neonatal expert, forensic pathologist, clinical scientist or radiologist prepared to privately or publicly support the diagnoses of murder and attempted murder. Of course he can't. No, there is no one. Well, I mean, kind of, there's a Bowen, isn't there? But yeah, she's not saying anything, obviously. On the 14th of October, that's obviously this year, MD emailed Evans's fellow expert witnesses, paediatrician Dr. Sandy Bowen, radiologist, professor. I mean, he's doing brilliant stuff here. Everything has to be picked at. Everything has to be picked at to not for one-upmanship, nothing to do with that. It's about the truth. All this is just about what is the truth here, and what statements are being made, even with a goodwill, that aren't quite right, are still not there with it. So suboptimal care is one of those kind of, I don't know who's created that phrase, suboptimal. And this is something that Michael McConville says in his podcast. He said, what's suboptimal? And it's terrible. Come on, let's call it what it is. Let's call a spade a spade. It's not suboptimal. It's like, it could still be very good then. It just wasn't the very, very apotheosis, the very best of care. It was just a little bit, tiny bit less. No, it's a covering word to say, actually, you can call terrible, negligent care suboptimal. And it doesn't sound quite so bad, does it, as saying it's terrible and negligent. And that's why they use these words. That's why these words are used within the NHS, to sort of get out of responsibility, to avoid accountability, and to minimise and diminish what's happened, i.e. to lie about it. Okay, so we've got MD, Dr. Philip Hammond. He's written to Dr. Sandy Bowen, radiologist, Professor Owen Arthurs, and pathologist Dr. Andreas Marnarides, another dodgy character, asking if they too are following Evans's lead in disowning the death of 3 of the babies by air force down the nasogastric tube. Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear what their view on that is, wouldn't it? But as we hear now, and this is great work from Dr. Hammond here to put them, hold their feet to the fire about this, isn't it? Because you'd want to know, wouldn't you? The lead witness, although he didn't want to call himself an expert witness, the lead person, Evans, dragged all these other so-called experts along with them, and they were willing to go, willing to be paid for it and go. And now he's changed his mind. Have they changed their mind? Thus far, Dr. Philip Hammond says, none has answered. But they're cowards. They're utter cowards, because they know what a mess they're in as well. And they just want it all to go away. They're happy for Lucy Letby to stay in prison for the rest of her life for crimes that didn't happen. All of them are. Every single one of them are. Every officer that's on Hummingbird is happy for that to happen. Happy for that to happen. Every one of these so-called experts, that's the level of the morality. That's the lack of morality we're talking about here. Everyone involved in that justice system, I'm talking about the prosecution side and the CPS, all very happy for the innocent person to stay in prison, more than happy, wants that to happen, rather than the embarrassment for them or the criticism that they're going to face. And it should be a storm of criticism such that many, many people lose their jobs, and I think some should go to prison, but that's very unlikely to happen because these people are protected. The system will want to protect them, and the system wants to protect itself. Hence you have the Thirlwall inquiry, the charade and the farce and the fiction of the Thirlwall inquiry. Thus far none is answered. Meanwhile, the parents of the babies who died or were harmed at the hospital are waking up to the possibility that some babies might have died from clinical negligence rather than deliberate harm. Now, I just want to reiterate here that some, we don't know how many and we don't know which ones, don't need to wake up to that as such. They need to go back to their previous perception of that, because, as I say, there's a newspaper report at the time in 2017 saying that a Chester solicitor is representing several families, is what the report says. I've got it in my notes somewhere, the link. Several families are being represented because of the deaths. This is before the investigation starts, and once the investigation starts, well, all that goes away. So it's not that they wake up to the possibility. They already understood the possibilities, at least several of them did, several of the families did, back in 7 years ago. So it's not waking up to the new possibility of it, it's a reversion to their original perception of what was likely happened there. The failures of the NHS, the failures of that particular trust, and the failures of those doctors, those consultants. So I have to, again, be very specific about the reality of what is likely to be happening with several of those patients. It might be that some of the parents, that it is a new possibility for them, but certainly for some of them it is not a new possibility that they wake up to. It's a state of mind and it's a perception that they revert to, that they were already in 7 years ago, before this fake investigation was supplanted over what should have been an investigation and a series of investigations into medical negligence and a failure at trust level. So he says here that, they're waking up to the possibility some babies might have died from clinical negligence rather than deliberate harm. So I've challenged that, obviously, in the way I just did. How unlucky is that? How unlucky is that? Unless you're a lawyer. What does that mean? Unlucky for the parents, as you mean? Unlucky. I don't understand that. It bothers me when people write in sort of, I know the private eyes is got this kind of angle of being quite, having a kind of register of, being smart and making smart comments. But what does that mean? How unlucky is that? Unless you're... Is it about luck? Is it anything to do with luck? I know perhaps I don't need to flog that. I get what he means. Yes, of course, the lawyers are going to benefit. But then that's not really the way to look at it either, because those parents did need, as they did need the solicitor in Chester at the time, and they always needed them to bring the case, because you've got to then, you're in the game, as it were, then, of fighting the NHS solicitors. So they did need representation. I perhaps I won't drill into that further, because it's probably not worth it. But it's not my cup of tea, that kind of sort of unfocused statement about luck, and it's not to do with luck. It's to do with it's to do with at least moral criminality is what it's to do with, and corruption. In terms of what was stopped from progressing from 2017 onwards, and what was put in its place. What was stopped from progressing was what was obviously needed to happen, which was a series of investigations into medical negligence and trust level failure for all those babies, and perhaps more, which might have created this domino effect. I mean, a long time ago, over a year ago, I did two videos about this called Follow the Money. That's what I was talking about then, the potential domino effect from not just from this trust. It becomes a news story, of course. It would become a news story if there's a series of parents with very large payouts for negligence because of their babies had died because of negligent, not suboptimal, not substandard, but negligent. Let's get the words right, because the words have connotations and meanings and real reference in the real world. And you start using this fake language like suboptimal, you're not really talking about what's happening, and that's how you cover up reality. And that's how you lie about the truth and lie about reality. Or you cover up the truth. You mask it. So anyway, that's the end of that article. I don't know. I'm not checking on Twitter for a couple of days. I just feel a bit on edge, really, about a lot of things. And but I know Jayaram is giving evidence today. I'm gonna go back on Twitter tomorrow and look at the Thirlwall inquiry as well, and look at any documents that have been uploaded uploaded to their website about his evidence, that he's given evidence that Jayaram's given, and indeed the evidence given by Dr. Jane Horden and Dr. Joe McPartland yesterday. So I'll catch up with that, but it'll still be there tomorrow, won't it? I just wanted to finish this article. I'm glad I went through it on this level of detail. There's part 8, which is a kind of that Dr. Hammond has done, which is a look at. I think he's using the springboard is the book done by, I won't use their names even, but done by the two BBC quote unquote journalists. I might think about that for a video, possibly. There was a video put up. There was a video put up which involved Mark MacDonald, who's the current person representing Lucy Letby. Seems like a great guy to me. So I think all of us looking into this are very pleased that he's on board, and we said that a long time ago when we first saw him making comments about it quite some time ago, and was, oh God, really hope he could be part of it, supporting Lucy for the future. A video was put up in which he's in conversation with a neonatologist, I believe it is, with a doctor, and then it was removed, and I think even the channel was removed. Then somebody captured part of the video and made notes about it before it was removed on Reddit. And again, my friend Catherine sent me some notes that this person on Reddit, who's unnamed, I don't know who they are, but they made notes about this video which has been taken off. They're interesting notes about, but they kind of go towards strategy, and maybe that's why that video was taken off. It was decided maybe it's not the best thing to have out there at this point in time while they're preparing this CCRC application, and while the Thirlwall inquiry is ongoing and potentially releasing things that it doesn't really want to release but happens to. Maybe that's the reason. I thought I could talk about those Reddit notes, but I thought about it again. I thought if they've taken that video off, i.e. Mark MacDonald and the doctor, I know his name, but I won't say it here just in case they want to keep their powder dry because they're in the midst of preparing an application. And this is a war for the truth. This is a war. It's not a game. And that system doesn't play fair with you. Obviously, we know that already. So I probably won't say anything about that. The notes from that video that were made about strategizing and where they're at, as it were. But it's good to know that. It's good to know, as Dr. Hammond more than intimates here, he states very clearly that there are many experts that are totally incredulous about Evans's and thereby all the prosecution's witnesses' evidence. But there's no one There is no one in the world that's come forward that wants to put their name to backing up Evans and co. Thank you very much for listening. All the best. Have a good day there. Bye-bye.